Welcome to the Ellevate podcast, conversations with women changing the face of business. And now your hosts, Kristy, Wallace, and Maricella, Herrera.
Hello and welcome to the Ellevate podcast. This is your host, Kristy Wallace, with my co-host, Maricella Herrera. Hi, Maricella. How's it going?
It's going. I'm annoyed.
Why are you annoyed?
So I was trying to work with a very, very, very large Excel file and my computer keeps crashing.
Oh, no.
But other than that, I'm fine. I didn't sleep last night.
Oh, that's not good. Why is that?
Well, I mean, I slept like an hour or two. I'm like really wired. I don't even know why. I have a lot of things in my on my mind, but also I'm Mary Kondoing my apartment.
Oh.
So there's stuff everywhere, and I just couldn't deal with it last night.
Got it. I feel you. I mean, so what you're doing, some spring cleaning. And that's always difficult because it gets messier before it gets neater.
Right. And I'm at that point.
Mm-hmm.
How are you?
Well, I mean, I'm curious what you're going to do with all of your shoes and bags.
I must admit, I haven't gone through the bags. I haven't fully gone through the shoes. A few of them have gone to the donation pile. It's sad, but it's true.
That is sad. But, you know, it happens. And good circular economy. Donate it. Someone else will give it a home and some love. So I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah.
But I'm doing great. So in New York City right now, it's heading into spring. It's getting sunnier. The days are getting longer. And it really reminds me how much we as humans, and particularly myself, are impacted by the weather. I found myself walking outside yesterday and I just was smiling and happy with the sun on my face. And I really love this time of year and this feeling that the weather elicits. So I'm in a good place right now. As long as
I'm happy to hear that.
As long as global warming doesn't, rear its ugly head right this week, but I'm sure it will at some point.
I'm happy to hear that you got yourself out in the sunshine, and it really does make a difference. Yesterday was my first run of the season where I thought I was going to die because I was so hot.
It was hot yesterday. But you have to prepare.
Yeah, it was not.
You've got your half marathon coming up.
Yep, coming up to not this Saturday, next Saturday. So we'll see how that goes.
Very, very exciting, and I'm excited for you, Maricella. Maybe one day we'll see your mug on a quarter on some currency.
Far from that, but that is very cool though. The quarters program that is happening.
Yeah, so before Maricella and I started this conversation for the podcast, we were talking about how the next round of American Women Quarters were announced. And I know, there was talk about Harriet Tubman being on the $20 bill, and then that got paused, and then we started. And so seeing continued progress in this area, but currency, I mean, it's so symbolic, obviously. It's our economy. It's symbolic of our ability to obviously purchase things, and I see it as donate and give back to other people. I mean, it's so central to our society, and yet really lacking in representation, and something you see every day and you touch. I just went through a whole currency project with my second grader who was learning about currency and what that looks like for her, the symbols there. So
I want to know more about that project.
So then seeing here that we're going to have, Maya Angelou and Sally Ride and so many iconic, amazing, impactful, historic women represented is pretty great. And Maricella, with the currency lesson with Zoe, So it's interesting. She's in a dual language program, French, English. So we were looking at euros, and I was going through all this old change I had and pulling out, change from when we traveled and looking at US currency. And a lot of it was nickels and quarters and pennies and dimes, or, the 1 cent euro and the 10 cent. And you can see, obviously, outside the US, there's more representation, still not enough. But when you look at, US currency, it's men. And so being able to now moving forward, show her some other symbols is pretty impactful to me. And then knowing that our quarter will have more representation.
So does this mean, like, I haven't really understood the program. So they're going to have all these amazing trailblazers on the quarter. Some are going to come out this year. Some are going to come out next year. And they're essentially just going to be in circulation.
Yep, they'll be in circulation. So we've seen, in U.S. currency, there was a couple of years ago, I don't even know when we started doing the state quarters. And then now we'll see trailblazing women being featured. So Native American dancer and the first American prima ballerina, Maria Tallchief, First Lady, author, reformer, and leader Eleanor Roosevelt, the first Black woman and first Native American woman to earn a pilot's license, Bessie Coleman, and others will join Sally Ride and Maya Angelou. And so it's just an exciting time. It's I think it's part of when you and I celebrate firsts, right? It feels sometimes small, feels every time long overdue. But it also feels hopeful, promising to just be able to talk about a step forward instead of a step backward.
Yeah, we need some of the celebrations, good news, steps forwards right now. So it's good. Well, I had a friend who used to collect the state quarters, and I think I will be that person collecting these quarters.
Yes. I love it. That is amazing. And we do need, just as you said, like things to look forward to, looking towards the future. What does that look like? And how do we each play a role in defining that? And today's guest, Sheela Subramanian, is spectacular. She's the vice president and co-founder of the Future Forum, which is a consortium backed by Slack. And she's the co-author of the forthcoming book, How the Future Works, Leading Flexible Teams to Do the Best Work of Their Lives. When we think about the workplace of the future, that involves all of us as consumers. What are the companies we want to spend money with? What are they doing? How are they treating their employees? It involves us if you're in the workforce. Where are you working? And, how is that workplace becoming more equitable, leaning into flexibility, but in an equitable way, leading into progress, change, autonomy, trust. There's so many things that we've seen over the past few years that are broken and need more attention to really move forward in a way in which we can all thrive and grow. So Sheela is going to be a speaker at our upcoming Mobilized Women Summit, and we're teeing that up today with our conversation on the podcast.
Yeah, I can't wait. I think Sheela is fantastic. It was funny because she was booking this podcast with Megan as I was reaching out to her to speak at Mobilized Women all at the same time without Megan and I knowing that we were both trying to get her on. I think the work that the Future Forum is doing is really important. I think Slack has an immense amount of information and data that they can use. And they've, from the start, been very, very vocal about their culture. So I love that they are bringing that and putting kind of their money where their mouth is and building this think tank and building this consortium of world of business looks like in the future and how we can adapt to it. So I'm really excited. I'm really excited to hear what she has to share in the podcast. And I'm really, really excited to hear her at our Mobilized Women panel. She's going to be on the session Why They Stay and talk about companies' role in employee well-being. There, we have a great panel lined up June 8th. Tune in. You can register for Mobilized Women at ellevatenetwork.com/summit. It's free. So hope to see you there.
Excellent. All right, let's get to my conversation with Sheela. Hi, Sheela, and welcome to the Ellevate podcast.
Hi, Kristy. Thanks so much for having me.
Let's kick it off learning a bit more about you. Would you mind sharing a bit about your story and how you got to where you are today?
Yes. So my name is Sheela Subramanian. I am the VP of Future Forum, which is a consortium backed by Slack. But more importantly, I am a mom of 2 young daughters, as well as a child of immigrant parents and a sister, a wife, and a friend. And so much of the people who have surrounded me throughout my life have helped me get to where I am today. I grew up in California. My parents immigrated to the U.S. from India, and they definitely instilled a work ethic in me of work twice as hard to make it half as far. I'm sure you've probably heard that phrase throughout your conversations. And the put your head down and work mentality really influenced me throughout my academic career as well as my professional career, post-college and grad school. And I would say after having my first daughter in 2016, I started realizing that the way that I'd always worked was no longer working. And the first in, last to leave, the person who responded to messages at all hours of the evening, that person could no longer be an effective employee and a mindful and present mother and supportive wife and friend. And I would say around 2017, 2018, I realized just how broken our system of work was in terms of how we reward people and promote people, how we are stuck to outdated norms of professionalism, and how the system is focused on inclusion, but it oftentimes orients towards assimilation. So over the last few years, I'm a co-founder of this consortium called Future Forum with the backing of my employer, Slack. I've studied work and how work has changed, especially over the last 2 years. And most importantly, how to make the system more inclusive for all types of people rather than the select few who have benefited historically.
I very much resonate with your story and had a very similar experience where I worked. I mean, I would say my career was like number one priority, took up 95% of my thoughts and time and all that. And then I had my son and was like, this is not going to work and something needs to shift. And I agree. The way we work absolutely needs to shift. And those systems and structures and who they support and don't. Given the work that you do, I imagine the last few years have been, I'm trying to think of the right word for it. I want to say something like a golden egg, and that's like not, I think, the right way of phrasing it. But I mean, you're living in this moment of great disruption and transformation that is being driven by a multitude of forces. And what was it like, given the work that you do, to really exist in this time, to see these changes and to be able to direct those conversations in new and meaningful ways?
Yes, the last 2 years, there have been a lot of topics that women have been shouting from the rooftops. Employees of color have been shouting from the rooftops for many years now. But over the last 2 years, it's felt like people are starting to listen a bit more. And that's been very fulfilling. I want to acknowledge that women are not okay right now. What we've seen from research is that 1 in 3 women are looking to either downshift their career or leave the workforce entirely. And 60% say that the pandemic has impacted their mental health. In addition, we've heard a lot from leaders in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but there's been an opportunity to move beyond employee resource groups or writing checks to fundamental change in how we work. And so what's been really fulfilling to see is how ears have opened and we've seen more leaders committed to change in terms of how we work. And one area that we focus a lot on in our research, I have an upcoming book about this as well, is flexibility. Since I started my career over 20 years ago, this is a decades-long issue, work has been focused on 5 days in the office from 9 to 5, or specific set of hours. And the pandemic has upended that, upended our reliance on the office, upended our reliance on these set hours. And leaders have had to shift from gatekeeping and time checking to actually leading with trust. And so I think that this conversation that we're having about flexibility, but more importantly around choice and trust, is a really solid one that we need to be having as we change how work is being designed and to become more inclusive for all types of employees. And I can talk more about what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I would love for you to, because it's, so the flip side of this is we're talking about flexibility, but then there's also the question about, well, then who might get left behind in a more flexible workforce if maybe you are working more from home and so not able to get that face time with management in the office, or your work is seen as less valuable, or it's not seen as much because maybe you're leaning into that flexibility. We're talking about companies who could say, yes, we are agreeing to more flexibility. We want a more flexible work environment. But yet you still have managers who don't have that trust, who they themselves haven't inherently changed the way that they manage, the way they view their employees, the way they support their employees, to thus make that team member set up for success. So it's like, yes, at the core, we need these shifts, we need these change, but we also need to be intentional about who continues to wield that power and how we need to be thoughtful about not creating more bias, more discrimination, more division in terms of opportunity through this change.
Yes, 100%. So what we have seen from the research in the last 2 years from Future Forum is that sense of belonging, as well as relationships with coworkers, have actually improved for employees of color. And when we first looked at this data, we had thought, well, you're not in the office every single day. How is your sense of belonging and how have your relationships improved? And a big part of the reason there is due to code switching. Code switching is the act of changing your behavior, the way you talk, even what you eat or how you wear your hair in order to fit in to the norms of the office. And flexible work has enabled all types of employees to reduce the amount of code switching that they have and be able to bring more of their whole selves to work. So that's a benefit. But to your point, if leaders aren't intentional about how they're applying flexible work models, there runs the challenge or the risk of proximity bias. Proximity bias is the favoritism towards someone who is located in a proximate area, so nearby, and in this case, in the office. And what we're seeing is that 41% of executives are concerned about proximity bias as their top concern about flexible work moving forward. Based on our data, what we're seeing, though, is that the people who want to return back into the office full-time, they tend to be white, they tend to be male, they tend to be executives, whereas those who want more flexibility are working parents, namely working moms, employees of color, and women. And to your point there, if we're rewarding people for their face time in the office and the amount of time that they're spending rubbing elbows with management, what we're going to see is that the gains that we've achieved over the last 2 years when it comes to sense of belonging in relationships will be erased when it comes to inequities around promotion, when it comes to getting stretch assignments, and ultimately visibility within the organization. So what we encourage executives to do is not be the first ones back in the office, but if they're committed to flexibility, to be the last ones back in the office and to not be there 5 days a week from 9 to 5. And in addition, during those promotion conversations, when you're thinking about who you're giving that stretch opportunity to, think about how you're measuring performance. It's not about, I know that this person's doing a great job because they're in the office all the time, so they're working hard. It has to move from the activity, the perceived activity, to the actual outcomes, the results, the impact that people are driving. And you made a really good point about managers. Based on our research, managers are struggling right now, and they're not equipped to lead distributed teams. And I would say the most important thing that leaders can do right now is to reskill their managers, to lead with trust, to be empathetic coaches, because right now most have been trained to be gatekeepers who are doing status checks or checking in to make sure that people are responding to their messages quickly enough. And they're measuring all the wrong things, which is ultimately resulting in their burnout.
Well, and I think too, in all of this, like I absolutely agree. And there's an aspect too around communication. And I'm just like thinking this through, which is, so yes, like trust that you're not seeing someone at their desk, but you trust that they're working wherever they are. That is trust. We're all responsible adults. We have jobs. We get them done. But there's, I think, mechanisms, especially from a management standpoint, around how we communicate what success looks like. What are those goals? What do you employee, what should you be focused on? How do you prioritize so that employees can be more independent, and it doesn't have to be, constantly turning to you in the desk next to you, asking you all those questions. There's clarity around that. And then how do we communicate out and up within the workforce to help facilitate those, understandings of the work that we're doing and how it's progressing, right? And it's just so, as we think about this future of work and distributed workforces and flex work, it's more, about the clarity of work, the understanding of contributions, the way we communicate that in different and new ways. And it's not this, one easy, yes, let's have hybrid workforce. It's how do we really truly think this through and set it up for success?
Yes, I completely agree with everything that you just said here. And there's 3 areas that managers really need to improve their skills on. The first is giving feedback itself, the act of giving feedback, and being really clear with their employees what expectations are, but also ensuring that the feedback that they're giving is outcomes-based, not necessarily personality-based. The Clayman Institute at Stanford a few years ago conducted a study, and what they saw was that women tend to get feedback that's personality-based, like, Sheela, you are super enthusiastic and you make everyone's day with your personality, versus Sheela, you are making an impact on the business with these 3 things that you've contributed to or that you've led. So managers need to be trained on how to actually give meaningful feedback to their employees on a regular basis so that they're not surprised when they get their performance review and they weren't expecting what they heard. The second is transparency. Transparency is a word that makes many people squirm. I've used it and I've seen many leaders get very uncomfortable by it. But what we're seeing from our research is that employees want their leaders to be transparent, especially over the last 2 years where no one's had the answers to what's next and what to expect. What we're seeing is that employees want to hear, I don't know, or we're still figuring things out, or most importantly, I need your help. And we're seeing some troubling numbers with regards to two-way transparency. 2/3 of leaders are not actually getting the feedback and involving their employees as they're planning out what work is going to look like for the organization. So transparency needs to happen in the form of like showing vulnerability as a manager and as a leader, but also asking for feedback and input from your employees. And to your point, I think, flexibility can happen without predictability. And so it's on the manager to set predictability for the organization. Early in my career, every day was a different fire drill that you had to get to as soon as possible. We need to shift away from that mentality because most of the time, those drills are not necessarily critical to happen ASAP. And so the role of the manager is to be able to say, this is what the next week looks like. This is what the next month looks like. This is your role in this time period. And these are my expectations for you with regards to response time, with regards to level of feedback, as well as your workload. Those conversations need to happen on a regular basis. And that's a shift in terms of what a manager's job should look like.
What are you hearing from leaders? Mm-hmm. I think, business leaders, CEOs, their role has inherently changed over the past few years. And you could argue it was moving in that direction anyway, thinking about, the business roundtable and, business social impact and multiple stakeholders, and you aren't just out there pandering to shareholders and public speaking, but it's really as a leader thinking about the culture and direction of your business and how you make it a place people want to work. You make it a place where people feel like they belong. Looking more internal to then see those impacts externally. And have you been seeing, is that what you're hearing from leaders, or am I totally making this up?
Yes. And, I think that one thing that I am hearing from some leaders is we need to go back to how things were before the pandemic. And what I push those leaders to think about is why. Why do we need to go back to the way that we were working back in 2019? And why do these top-down mandates need to happen? Because everybody's work is different. So there's one side of the conversation there. That said, I have seen more leaders really take their responsibility seriously when it comes to being transparent, getting feedback from their organizations, and also realizing that DE&I and flexible work, they go hand in hand. And CEOs need to be responsible for the equity and inclusion within their organization. It can't be someone else's job. It has to be something that they're committed to as well. So I think that the positive step is that many leaders are having conversations around inclusion. They're having conversations around not just where people work, but when people work, and also just trusting their employees. That said, it's going to be interesting to see the experience of those who are trying to revert back to how things were. Because what we are seeing is that 71% of people who are not happy with their level of flexibility, they're open to looking for new opportunities in the next year. And some may frame this as the great resignation. I like to think of it as the great rethink. Employees are just reconsidering the role of work in their lives. And leaders need to listen to their needs and wants and make sure that they're acting on their behalf. Because this is not a short-term play. This is a long-term play that's going to impact the health of their business 10 years down the road.
What are some of the other shifts or changes that you're seeing as you look towards the future?
So there are a few things that I think we're seeing a shift in, and we have a long way to go in. When we talk about flexibility, it's not just where people work, but so much of our conversation today is how many days are you coming into the office? And more importantly, it's when people work. And what we're seeing is 94% of people want flexibility in when they work. And it has tremendous impact in terms of sense of belonging, productivity, as well as satisfaction with work. Flexibility is number 2 behind compensation when it comes to determining job satisfaction. So having the conversation about choice, about giving people the flexibility to work on their terms, it's going to be continuous in the coming years. In addition, I'm just really excited about the shifting role of the leader. Leaders have historically been the ones who needed to have all of the answers. And there is a rise of the vulnerable leader, those who are more open to saying, I don't know, I need your help, or we're figuring this out. Those are all pieces that employees want right now. And I think we're going to be seeing more of in terms of a better way of working. And last but not least, we've spoken about presenteeism. We need to shift away from presenteeism to a more outcome-driven approach. And I think there's a balance between culture and outcomes that are reliant, that are dependent, on each organization. But this is a conversation that we need to continue to have. So we're not rewarding people for acting a certain way and propagating the monoculture that work has been historically.
This may be somewhat of a nonsensical question, but as I think about the business landscape, right, and a lot of what we're hearing or what I'm reading about in the news are the bigger companies, the, Fortune 50 who are, making big shifts, making bold statements. And yeah, it's something, I'm probably going to get this wrong. The, top 100 companies employ, 40% of the workforce or something like that. But so there's a lot of employees, but there's also a huge amount of opportunity in smaller companies to be more agile, to be, more in tune with your employees and their needs, to be open to change and transformation. Are you seeing this, these shifts and the intentionality within companies across the spectrum of business? Is it leading more in some industries or some company sizes than others?
Yes. I think we're seeing a different range of mandates regardless of industry. And this is not just a tech industry conversation. It's across finance, healthcare, really all range. And in the book, How the Future Works, we talk about Genentech and Royal Bank of Canada and how they're taking a people-first approach in figuring out how people work. You make a point about smaller organizations, and what we're seeing is with this great rethink that's happening, people are going to organizations where they can work the way that they want to work and live the way that they want to live. And the shift has happened over the last few years. In 2019, it was about, this is work and how does my life fit in? And now the conversation is more about, this is my life and how does work fit in? And so people are seeking new industries, they're seeking new sizes of companies, even new functional roles to figure out that fluidity between their work and their life and achieving a composition that works best for them. So this is definitely industry agnostic. The great resignation or the great rethink is happening across many different lines. And a big part of this is just the role of work in all of our lives.
So tell us more about the book.
I am so excited for this book. It's coming out May 17th. It's called How the Future Works, Leading Flexible Teams to Do the Best Work of Their Lives. And the focus of the book is to provide a blueprint for designing a better way of working. And it's a guide for leaders to construct a new way of work that it's flexible and in turn more inclusive for all types of employees. So we outline 7 steps that leaders can take to develop a more flexible way of working and also see the business results that they're aiming for. But I think it's really important for leaders to embrace this people-centric as well as digital-first way of working, and the book is a guide for getting there.
And could you also explain, for my own benefit, what does it mean to lead a consortium? I mean, it's I think not a standard role that we necessarily hear about in business and on this podcast. And I would love to better understand kind of what that means for you and what that day-to-day is like.
Yes. So Future Forum is a consortium with founding partners, including Boston Consulting Group, Miller Knoll, as well as Management Leadership for Tomorrow. And we have all come together to use data as well as executive conversation to design a way of working that's flexible, that's inclusive, as well as more connected. And the reason why Miller Knoll, BCG, and Management Leadership for Tomorrow were amazing founding partners is because we all bring a different perspective on what work should look like moving forward. And we work through the data, the research through our quarterly Future Forum Pulse, but we also host executive conversations to hear more about what different executives across industry, across company size, function, they're experiencing and their challenges are, so that we can figure out a better way of working. The consortium has just been great because, as I mentioned, there's a range of perspectives, and we also get to just debate what's the balance between being office-centric and digital-centric. How does diversity, equity, and inclusion play a role here? And what's the dynamic like? We're talking a lot about knowledge workers, but also we've had a conversation of what does this mean for frontline workers? So we're constantly pushing each other to talk more about the different angles that are related to people's experience about work, and then share that with the broader community.
Well, that sounds amazing. And thank you so much for sharing some of your insights with us here today. I think For many of us on a personal level, as managers, as leaders in organizations, we have experienced firsthand that, business needs to change. It doesn't work for all of us or any of us, if you're being honest. And it's time now to really drive that change. And so hearing from just everything that you've learned, your perspectives and insights is really helpful as we continue to push forward on this conversation.
Yes, we're just at the beginning. So I'm really excited to see what's to come.
Yes. And Sheela, we will be seeing you at Mobilized Women in June. So we're looking forward to that as well.
I am too.
All right.
Thank you again for having me today.
Thank you. All right, Maricella, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Sheela. She is truly amazing.
Yeah, she is. Yeah, and can't wait to hear her at Mobilized Women in a few weeks.
Yes, it'll be great to learn more from Sheela at Mobilized Women in a few weeks. And if you're interested in defining the future of work, I encourage you to join us at the next Executive Roundtable, Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. During the roundtables, we really want to make space to tackle the challenges and opportunities that are most relevant in our lives. We host our roundtables for executives, rising leaders, entrepreneurs, and that hour week aims to be the most impactful hour, where you can not only work through the challenges, the opportunities, the things that keep you up at night, but also walk away with a clear action plan for moving forward. At the next Executive Roundtable, we want to collectively define the future of work. Ellevate is about action and about a coalition of women who are creating a workforce and a workplace that works for all. So we're going to take this time to really identify what's not working, what is working. How do we share across business and sector best practices and ideas? And then how do we collectively as business leaders help drive and define the future of work? This week, we'll also have our Rising Leaders Roundtable, how to step in and speak up for what's right, and our Entrepreneur Roundtable around lessons learned from the first half of 2022. So a lot of great stuff happening, and we encourage you to join us for one of Ellevate's weekly roundtables.
Yes, definitely come. You won't regret it. It's a great space to meet new people, to crowdsource ideas, and honestly, just to take a much needed break to focus on yourself.
Yes, agreed. I love it. I always love the roundtable. And I also love this week's History Makers. We have lots to celebrate here. Corinne Jean-Pierre became the first Black and first openly gay person to serve as U.S. Press Secretary.
Blythe Blackistone became the first woman to serve as a commanding officer of a naval special warfare unit.
Tiffany Mickle became the Virginia Law Review's first Black editor-in-chief.
Captain Taylor By became the first female aviator to be awarded the Cornelian Jr. Trophy, and I probably butchered that. I'm so sorry.
Lisa Cook became the first Black woman to serve on the Federal Reserve's Board of Governors.
And Kelly Hughes became the first Sports Illustrated swimsuit model to show her C-section scar in the magazine's 58-year history.
I'm just shaking my head. But go, Kelly. Body positivity, that's amazing.
58 years.
All right. So much to celebrate this week. Lots of great stuff. Learned so much from our guest, Sheela Subramanian. And next week, we'll be back here with Laura Hodgson, who is the co-author of Level Up alongside Stacey Abrams. Level Up is aimed at helping women, specifically women of color, overcome the systemic challenges associated with launching and scaling a competitive business. See you back here next week on the Ellevate podcast. Thanks so much for listening to Ellevate. If you like what you hear, help a girl out. Subscribe to the Ellevate podcast on iTunes. Give us 5 stars and share your review. Also, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at EllevateNTWK, that's Ellevate Network, and become a member. You can learn all about membership and all the great things that Ellevate Network is doing at our website, www.ellevatenetwork.com. That's ELLEVATE network.com. And special thanks to our producer, Catherine Heller. She rocks. And to our voiceover artist, Rachel Griesinger. Thanks so much, and join us next week.